The hum of the mower was a visceral affront, a mechanical maw chewing through the soft, verdant carpet of my yard. It was a sound that scraped against my nerves, a violation of a peace I'd carefully cultivated over years. From my kitchen window, framed by the cheerful yellow of my sunflowers, I watched the uniformed figures, their faces obscured by the glare of the sun and the impersonal masks of their profession, systematically dismantle my sanctuary. My clover lawn. It wasn't a lawn in the conventional sense, not the manicured emerald green expanse that was the suburban ideal. Mine was a tapestry of white and pink clover blossoms, dotted with the occasional dandelion and a scattering of wild violets. It buzzed with life, a miniature ecosystem humming with the industry of bees, butterflies, and a host of other tiny creatures. It was, in short, my pride and joy. The letter had arrived a week ago, pristine white and embossed with the crest of the Homeowners Association. Notice of violation, it declared in stark, unforgiving font. Property at 17 Meadow Lane is in violation of HOA bylaws, Section 4, Article C, Lawn Maintenance and Aesthetics, grass height exceeding permissible limits. Failure to comply within 7 days will result in fines and potential remediation by the association. I'd reread it, my stomach churning with a mixture of disbelief and a simmering anger. Grass height exceeding permissible limits. The audacity! My clover wasn't grass. It was a conscious choice, a rebellion against the sterile uniformity that choked our neighborhood. While my neighbors meticulously trimmed their emerald carpets to a uniform 1.5 inches, I let mine grow, a riot of soft, fragrant blooms that reached for the sun. It was a haven, not just for me, but for the buzzing, fluttering, crawling inhabitants of the natural world. My daughters, Lily and Daisy, had been the ones to first notice the bees. They were 7 and 5 then, their laughter echoing through the yard as they chased iridescent dragonflies and marveled at the plump bumblebees, their fuzzy bodies dusted with pollen. "Mommy, look! The bees love our flowers!" Daisy had exclaimed, her small hands outstretched, trying to catch a glimpse of a particularly industrious honeybee. That was when the idea had begun to bloom in my mind, a seed of defiance against the encroaching conformity. I'd started small, letting a patch of clover grow wild in one corner. Then, inspired by a documentary on the declining bee populations, I'd expanded. I researched native wildflowers, learned about the importance of diverse habitats, and gradually transformed my entire front yard into a living, breathing testament to biodiversity. It was a labor of love, a constant learning process, and a source of immense satisfaction. The HOA, however, saw it differently. To them, my clover lawn was an eyesore, an affront to the meticulously manicured lawns that defined their vision of suburban perfection. "It looks unkempt." Mrs. Henderson, the HOA president, had sniffed at a neighborhood barbecue, her perfectly coiffed hair practically vibrating with disapproval. "It's attracting bugs." Bugs. Yes, it did attract bugs. It attracted the very creatures that were vital to our planet's health. It attracted the pollinators, the unsung heroes of our food system, the silent architects of our blooming world. And I, for one, was proud of it. So, when the notice arrived, I didn't immediately cower. A flicker of something defiant sparked within me. They wanted aesthetics? They wanted uniformity? They would get it, but not in the way they expected. I watched as the mower whirred its destructive path, each pass a fresh stab of pain. The vibrant green was replaced by a stark, uniform stubble. The delicate clover blossoms, the tiny jewels of my garden, were obliterated. The hum of the mower seemed to mock me, a triumphant roar of conformity. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and stinging. It wasn't just the lawn. It was a symbol of everything I fought for, everything I believed in. being systematically erased. My husband, Mark, a man of quiet practicality, had tried to reason with me. "Sarah, honey, it's just a lawn. We can reseed it. We can just keep it short. It's not worth the fight." But it was. It was worth fighting for. It was worth standing up for the wildness, for the beauty that wasn't manicured and controlled. It was worth defending the tiny creatures who had no voice, no power to defend themselves against the relentless march of human neatness. As the mower finally sputtered to a halt, leaving behind a patchy, wounded landscape, a resolve hardened within me. They had mowed my clover lawn for aesthetics. Well, I would give them aesthetics. I would give them a different kind of aesthetics, one that resonated with the pulse of the earth, not the sterile dictates of a suburban committee. I walked out the back door, the scent of freshly cut grass, or rather, the scent of decapitated clover, still hanging heavy in the air. Lily and Daisy were watching from the porch, their faces etched with a confusion that mirrored my own. "Mommy, where did the flowers go?" Lily asked, her voice small and tremulous. I knelt beside them, pulling them into a hug. "They'll be back, sweetie," I murmured, my voice thick with unshed tears. "They'll be back, and they'll be stronger than ever." That night, as the moon cast long shadows across my violated lawn, I sat at my computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The fight, I realized, was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was going to win. I would find a way to protect my clover lawn, to make it not just a personal sanctuary, but a protected haven. I would make them understand that beauty wasn't always found in uniformity, and that sometimes the wildest things were the most precious. My search began with keywords that felt like a desperate plea. Protecting wild gardens, native plant habitats, pollinator protection laws. I scrolled through endless pages of scientific journals, government websites, and impassioned blog posts. My initial anger had begun to morph into a focused determination, fueled by the knowledge that I wasn't alone in my love for the natural world, and that there were systems in place, however obscure, to safeguard it. I stumbled upon articles about the Endangered Species Act, about conservation easements, and then a glimmer of hope about programs that certified private lands as wildlife habitats. The idea took root. What if I could get my lawn officially recognized for its ecological value? What if I could turn this perceived violation into a declaration of its importance? My research led me to the National Wildlife Federation's Certified Wildlife Habitat Program. It was a grassroots initiative, encouraging individuals to create backyards that provided food, water, shelter, and places to raise young for wildlife. It seemed, achievable. But I wanted more than just a certificate on my wall. I wanted something with teeth, something that would make the HOA's mowing crew think twice before they returned. The concept of federal protection, of a designation that carried legal weight, began to form in my mind. It felt audacious, almost laughable. My little clover lawn, a patch of suburban defiance, federally protected? But the more I delved into the intricacies of environmental law and conservation efforts, the more I realized that such protections, while rare for individual residential properties, weren't entirely out of the realm of possibility, especially when the ecological benefits were significant and demonstrable. I spent hours poring over the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website, navigating through dense legal jargon and bureaucratic pathways. I learned about the different categories of protected lands, the criteria for designation, and the process involved. It was a labyrinth, but I was no longer intimidated. The image of those whirring blades, the destruction of so much vibrant life, had forged a resilience in me. My focus narrowed. I needed evidence. I needed to prove that my lawn wasn't just a collection of weeds and clover, but a vital ecological resource. I started meticulously documenting the species that visited my yard. I bought a field guide to local butterflies and bees and spent my afternoons with a notebook and a magnifying glass, cataloging every fluttering wing and buzzing body. I took photographs, countless photographs, of bees laden with pollen, of ladybugs diligently patrolling for aphids, of the delicate dance of damselflies over the dew-kissed clover. I contacted local entomologists and botanists, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. I explained my situation, the HOA's threat, and my burgeoning plan. To my surprise, many were not only receptive, but enthusiastic. Dr. Aris Thorne, a renowned entomologist at the local university, became an unexpected ally. He'd been vocal about the alarming decline in pollinator populations and saw my lawn as a microcosm of what needed to be done on a larger scale. "Sarah," he'd said, his voice a low rumble of genuine interest over the phone. "What you've created here is more valuable than any perfectly manicured lawn. It's a lifeline. And yes, there are ways to protect these vital spaces." He explained the concept of habitat certification through recognized conservation organizations and how such certifications, when robust and well documented, could be considered by governmental agencies in certain contexts. He mentioned programs that offered grants and technical assistance for private landowners who were actively contributing to conservation efforts. It wasn't a direct path to federal protection for a single residential lawn, but it was a crucial step. It was about building a case, a scientifically sound argument for the ecological significance of my property. The HOA, meanwhile, sent a second letter, this one even more curt. It detailed the fines that would be levied if the lawn wasn't brought into compliance within 48 hours. The pressure was mounting, but my resolve had solidified. I was no longer just defending my lawn. I was fighting for a principle, for the recognition of a different kind of beauty, a beauty that was alive and thriving. The fight had officially escalated, and I was ready. The second notice from the HOA felt less like a warning and more like a pronouncement of war. Its stark, impersonal script, embossed on cheap paper, seemed to glare at me from the doormat, a fresh stab of violation. The whirring blades of conformity were churning, and this time they were aimed directly at my sanctuary. Mark, ever the pragmatist, sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Sarah, honey, it's just grass. We can reseed. It's not worth the fight." But it was worth the fight. It was worth more than Mark could possibly understand, more than Mrs. Henderson and her Council of Conformity could ever appreciate. My clover lawn wasn't just about aesthetics, or even about the quiet practicality of less mowing. It was about a conscious choice to embrace a different kind of beauty, a wildness that had been systematically dismantled in our neighborhood, replaced by a sterile uniformity. It was about recognizing the vital role of the unsung heroes, the bees, the butterflies, the tiny architects of our ecosystem, that were being systematically erased by the relentless pursuit of neatness. The audacity of their demand, the sheer entitlement to dictate the very pulse of my property, simmered into a low, steady burn of resolve within me. I wouldn't let them obliterate the cheerful tapestry of clover, dotted with the delicate dance of hoverflies and the frantic hum of bumblebees. I wouldn't let them decimate the miniature ecosystem that vibrated with life, a stark contrast to the emerald manicured deserts that choked our street. My daughters, Lily and Daisy, had been my initial inspiration, their delighted shrieks as they chased butterflies through the soft, fragrant blooms, a constant reminder of the magic I was nurturing. Now, they were my quiet allies. Daisy, ever the artist, had taken to sketching the intricate patterns of the clover leaves and the iridescent wings of the dragonflies that flitted through the taller stalks. Lily, with her burgeoning scientific curiosity, had started a small notebook meticulously documenting every species she could identify, her brow furrowed in concentration as she peered through a magnifying glass at a ladybug. "Mom," Lily had said, her voice a tremulous whisper as she pointed to the second notice. "They're going to cut it down, aren't they?" Her eyes, so like mine, were wide with a confusion that mirrored my own simmering disbelief. "Not if I can help it, sweetie," I'd promised, my own voice a little rougher than I intended. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the glare of the overhead light illuminating stacks of research papers and printouts. I'd spent hours poring over websites, navigating the dense, bureaucratic labyrinth of federal conservation programs. It felt daunting, a far cry from the simple joy of planting seeds. But the thought of those whirring blades, the destructive potential of their impersonal adherence to a narrow definition of aesthetics, fueled my determination. I needed more than just a pretty lawn. I needed legal weight. I needed undeniable proof of its ecological significance. Dr. Aris Thorne, the entomologist whose gentle demeanor belied a fierce dedication to his field, had been invaluable. He'd visited my yard, his eyes alight with genuine fascination as he'd cataloged the species, his pronouncements echoing my own observations. "Sarah," he'd said, his voice soft but firm, "this isn't just a lawn. This is a microcosm. In an area dominated by monoculture turf, you've created a vital pocket of biodiversity. The decline in pollinator populations is alarming, and spaces like this are a lifeline. Your property, with its density of native clover and the variety of insects it supports, is demonstrably valuable." He'd helped me understand the process of habitat certification. It wasn't a simple application. It required meticulous documentation, photographic evidence, and a scientifically sound argument for the ecological value of my property. It involved demonstrating the presence of specific plant species crucial for pollinators, recording insect activity, and detailing the absence of harmful pesticides. It was a far cry from the HOA's simplistic demand for a uniform, emerald expanse. It was about proof, about science, about the tangible contribution my small patch of earth was making to a larger ecological effort. I began systematically documenting everything. Armed with my phone and a growing confidence, I started taking detailed photos and videos. I captured the dew-kissed clover in the early morning light, the intricate patterns of pollen baskets on a bee's legs, the delicate dance of a damselfly perched on a blade of grass. I even purchased a small field guide and began sketching the different types of bees and butterflies that frequented my yard, noting their behavior and the flowers they visited. Lily and Daisy eagerly joined in, their youthful enthusiasm infectious. They'd point out new discoveries, their voices filled with wonder. "Mom, look! A new kind of bee! It's fuzzy!" Daisy would exclaim, her crayon poised over her sketchpad. Lily, meanwhile, would be busy cross-referencing her findings with my field guide. "It looks like a bumblebee, Mom. A queen bumblebee, maybe. She's carrying a lot of pollen." The HOA, however, was not waiting for my scientific thesis to be published. The second notice had a deadline, and the threat of fines loomed larger. Whispers started to circulate in the neighborhood, disapproving glances from Mrs. Henderson as she drove by in her pristine SUV, hushed conversations at the community mailbox. I could feel the weight of their collective disapproval, the silent judgment that my neglected yard was a blight on their carefully curated suburban paradise. Mark, though still wary, had started to come around. He saw the passion in my eyes, the meticulous effort I was putting in, and perhaps, he admitted grudgingly, the sheer absurdity of the HOA's stance. "Okay, Sarah," he'd said, watching me meticulously photograph a fritillary butterfly. "You've got my support. Just try not to get us arrested, all right?" The next step, Dr. Thorne had advised, was to formally apply for certification with a recognized conservation organization. He'd provided me with the contact information for a regional chapter of the Pollinator Partnership. It was a significant undertaking, requiring a detailed proposal and a site visit. but it was the most direct path to the kind of protection I needed. I spent days crafting my application, weaving my personal narrative with the scientific data. I wrote about the initial violation, the visceral reaction I'd had to the threat of destruction, and the subsequent realization that my lawn was more than just a personal preference. It was a vital ecological asset. I detailed the species I'd identified, the blooming cycles of the clover and other wildflowers I'd allowed to flourish, and the absence of any chemical intervention. I included photographs, Lily's and Daisy's drawings, and Dr. Thorne's emailed endorsement. The waiting was agonizing. Every rustle of leaves, every distant rumble of a lawnmower sent a prickle of anxiety through me. I imagined the HOA's enforcement committee, their faces impassive, their minds already made up. I envisioned them arriving with their own mowers, their mechanical maw ready to devour the vibrant life I had so carefully cultivated. Then, a letter arrived. Not from the HOA, but from the Pollinator Partnership. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it, half expecting a polite rejection. Instead, the words blurred before my eyes. "We are pleased to inform you that your property has been officially recognized as a certified pollinator habitat." It was real. It was tangible. Embossed on thick, cream-colored paper was a certificate, a testament to the value of my clover lawn. It declared my yard a vital sanctuary for bees, butterflies, and other beneficial insects, a testament to my commitment to ecological stewardship. The next day, as if on cue, a notice arrived from the HOA. This one was different, more formal, and carried the unmistakable scent of impending legal action. It stated that I had failed to comply with neighborhood aesthetic standards and that the HOA would proceed with remediation, at my expense, within 10 days. A cold dread washed over me. I looked at the certificate, its official seal a beacon of hope, then at the HOA's notice, its threat a dark cloud. I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Thorne's number. "Eris," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I've got the certification, but the HOA is threatening to mow it down anyway. What happens now?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Dr. Thorne's voice, laced with a quiet understanding and a hint of excitement, came through. "Sarah," he said, "you've done it. You've created a legally recognized habitat. Now, you have leverage. You have the proof they can't ignore." He paused, a thoughtful hum in his tone. The HOA's bylaws, while rigid, usually have clauses regarding the protection of natural resources or compliance with federal regulations. Your certification falls squarely into that category. This isn't just about aesthetics anymore. This is about environmental conservation. This is about federal protection. He explained that with the official certification, I could formally challenge the HOA's actions. I could present the certificate as irrefutable evidence that my lawn was not a violation, but a valuable ecological asset. The HOA's mandate was for aesthetics, but my certification was for conservation. This, he assured me, was a powerful distinction. Armed with my certificate and Dr. Thorne's guidance, I requested a special meeting with the HOA board. Mrs. Henderson predictably presided, her expression a mask of polite disdain. The room was filled with the usual suspects, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. "Ms. Gable," Mrs. Henderson began, her voice dripping with saccharine authority. "We are here to discuss your continued non-compliance with the neighborhood covenants. Your property remains an unsightly blight." Before she could continue, I stood up, my heart pounding, but my resolve hardened. I walked to the front of the room and placed the framed certificate on the table, directly in front of her. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice clear and strong, "this is not a blight. This is a certified pollinator habitat. It is federally recognized as a valuable ecological space, crucial for the survival of our declining bee and butterfly populations. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Mrs. Henderson stared at the certificate, her perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching in disbelief. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands as if it were an alien artifact. This is irrelevant," she sputtered, her composure beginning to fray. "Our covenants are about maintaining property values and a certain look. And my property, as certified by the Pollinator Partnership, contributes to a healthy environment, which I would argue significantly enhances property values," I countered, quoting Dr. Thorne. "Furthermore, federal regulations and established conservation principles often supersede local HOA bylaws, especially when it comes to environmental protection." I explained, calmly and clearly, the significance of the certification, the scientific backing, and the legal implications. I detailed the species present, the benefits to the ecosystem, and the growing awareness of the importance of such habitats. I saw a flicker of confusion, then dawning comprehension, on the faces of some board members. Others, like Mrs. Henderson, remained resolutely stony-faced, their dedication to conformity unwavering. "You cannot demand I destroy a federally recognized habitat," I stated, my gaze meeting hers directly. "This lawn is no longer just my choice. It is a protected space." The meeting ended in a tense stalemate. Mrs. Henderson refused to acknowledge the validity of the certification, clinging to her interpretation of the bylaws. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The other board members, faced with official documentation and the potential for legal challenges, were clearly hesitant. In the following weeks, a subtle shift occurred. The HOA's aggressive stance softened, replaced by a cautious, almost bewildered silence. No more notices arrived, no more threats of fines. The whirring blades of conformity, for now, had been blunted. My clover lawn continued to thrive, a vibrant tapestry of green, white, and pink, humming with the industry of its tiny inhabitants. Lily and Daisy still chased butterflies, their laughter echoing through the quiet afternoon. Mark would often sit on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the bees diligently at work, a small, proud smile playing on his lips. The fight wasn't entirely over, I knew. The HOA's rigid adherence to their narrow vision of aesthetics wouldn't disappear overnight. But I had won this battle. I had taken a seemingly trivial neighborhood dispute and transformed it into a powerful statement about the value of nature, the importance of biodiversity, and the right to create a sanctuary, however small, in a world that often prioritized sterile uniformity. My clover lawn, once a source of contention, was now a symbol of defiance, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful and valuable things are the ones that don't fit the conventional mold. It was proof that even in the heart of suburbia, a wild heart could beat, and with a little research, a lot of determination, and the unwavering support of science, it could even be federally protected. The silence that followed Mrs. Henderson's sputtering pronouncements was thick, almost tangible. It hung in the air like the scent of honeysuckle after a summer rain, a fragile piece that I knew could be shattered by the slightest tremor. The other board members, their faces a mixture of apprehension and dawning understanding, avoided my gaze, their eyes darting between me, Mrs. Henderson, and the embossed certificate clutched in my hand. It wasn't just paper. It was a shield, a declaration, a testament to the vibrant life that pulsed beneath the surface of our manicured neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson, however, was not ready to yield. Her face, usually a mask of stern disapproval, was now contorted with a mixture of disbelief and simmering fury. A habitat?" she scoffed, the word dripping with disdain. "This is a residential community, not a nature preserve. We have standards, you know, aesthetics, uniformity. This patch of weeds you call a lawn is an affront to everything we stand for." I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the familiar scent of clover, a fragrance that had become my defiant anthem, fill my lungs. "Mrs. Henderson," I began, my voice steady, though a tremor of adrenaline still vibrated through me. "This isn't just weeds. This is a carefully cultivated ecosystem. It's a haven for pollinators, a crucial link in the chain of ecological health. And as per the Pollinator Partnership's guidelines, and by extension federal designations for such habitats, it is now legally protected. Your bylaws, which I respect as a homeowner, cannot supersede federal and established conservation protocols. This certificate confirms that my property is contributing to a vital environmental effort, not detracting from the neighborhood's appearance." Her jaw tightened. "Legally protected? Don't be absurd. This is our neighborhood. We decide what's acceptable. We have the power to enforce our rules. We can still mow it. We can fine you into oblivion." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. She was bluffing, and she knew it. The weight of the certificate, the scientific backing from Dr. Thorne, the potential for an outright legal battle with an environmental organization and potentially even government agencies. It was all too much for her to simply dismiss. The other board members were clearly calculating the risks, the potential for negative publicity, the sheer hassle of it all. "You can try," I said, my voice gaining a quiet strength. "But if you send your mowing crew onto my property to destroy a federally recognized pollinator habitat, you'll be facing more than just a disgruntled homeowner. You'll be facing a legal challenge that will put this entire HOA under a microscope. And I assure you, I have documented every single species that calls this lawn home with the help of Dr. Thorne. We have photographic evidence, scientific data, and the full backing of conservation organizations. The aesthetics you're so concerned with are rapidly becoming obsolete in the face of a global ecological crisis. My lawn, Mrs. Henderson, is not an eyesore. It's a small but vital part of the solution." The air crackled with unspoken tension. Mrs. Henderson's face had gone a peculiar shade of puce. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then seemed to deflate slightly. The other board members exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a man named Mr. Davies, who had always struck me as more of a follower than a leader, cleared his throat. "Sarah has a point, Eleanor," he said, his voice hesitant. "This habitat certification, it's official, isn't it? We can't just ignore that. The legal ramifications." "Nonsense," Mrs. Henderson snapped, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. She glanced around the room, seeking support, but found only a sea of uncertain faces. The meeting, which had begun with such an air of predictable condemnation, had morphed into something entirely unexpected. The power dynamic had shifted, not with shouting or threats, but with quiet determination and the undeniable weight of scientific fact and legal recognition. We'll need to review this," Mrs. Henderson finally conceded, her tone grudging. "We'll need to consult our legal counsel. This is unprecedented." "I'm happy to provide them with all the documentation," I offered, my tone polite but firm. "Dr. Thorne is also available for consultation, should they require expert opinion." The meeting adjourned shortly thereafter, the atmosphere palpably different from when it began. Mrs. Henderson swept out, her back ramrod straight, a picture of indignant retreat. The other board members, however, lingered for a moment, some offering me tentative nods of acknowledgement, others a look of what seemed to be reluctant admiration. The battle was won, at least for now. My clover lawn, the vibrant tapestry of life that had been so carelessly dismissed, had not only survived, but had earned a measure of respect. Walking home, the late afternoon sun warming my face, I felt a profound sense of exhaustion mixed with a giddy exhilaration. The whirring blades of the mower, the symbol of conformity and destruction, had been silenced, at least on my property. The cheerful buzz of bees, the soft rustle of clover leaves, the darting flight of butterflies, These were the sounds of victory, the unsung symphony of my defiance. The next few weeks were a quiet period of observation and anticipation. The HOA remained largely silent, the promised consultation with their legal counsel apparently ongoing. I saw Mrs. Henderson occasionally, her encounters with me marked by a stiff nod and a pointed lack of eye contact. The other homeowners, however, seemed more curious than anything. Some would pause as they walked their dogs, their eyes lingering on my lawn with a newfound interest. A few even struck up conversations, their questions tinged with a respectful tone I hadn't heard before. "Is that really a protected habitat?" A young woman named Emily, whose own lawn was a perfectly manicured emerald expanse, asked me one afternoon. I saw the certificate at the HOA meeting. It looked official. "It is," I confirmed, kneeling to point out a tiny iridescent beetle crawling on a clover leaf. "And it's more than just a certificate. It's a vibrant, thriving ecosystem. Look," I gestured to a patch where a bumblebee was diligently working, its fuzzy body laden with pollen. "These are the unsung heroes of our environment, and they need places like this to survive." Emily's eyes widened, and she leaned closer. "Wow, I never really looked at it before. It's actually pretty." That simple acknowledgement, that shift in perspective, was more rewarding than any legal victory. It was the beginning of a ripple effect, a quiet revolution spreading through the sterile uniformity of our suburban landscape. One sunny Saturday morning, I was out tending to my herb garden, the familiar hum of insect life a comforting soundtrack, when I heard a hesitant knock at my door. It was Lily and Daisy, my daughters, their faces bright with excitement. "Mom! Mom!" Lily exclaimed, tugging on my sleeve. "Mrs. Gable from down the street is asking about your lawn. She said she's tired of all the spraying and wants her yard to be like yours." Daisy chimed in. "Yeah, and Mr. Henderson, the one who always complains about dandelions, he was looking at it too. He said he might want to let his grass grow a little longer." A wave of warmth washed over me. The seed of change had been planted, not just in my own yard, but in the minds of my neighbors. The fight hadn't just been about saving my clover lawn. It had been about challenging a narrow definition of beauty and value, about demonstrating that a different way of living, a more harmonious coexistence with nature, was not only possible, but essential. Later that week, I received an email from Dr. Thorne. He had been contacted by a representative from the Pollinator Partnership who had heard about my situation and wanted to use it as a case study. They were interested in exploring ways to streamline the certification process for residential properties and to provide resources for homeowners looking to create their own pollinator havens. "Your proactive approach, Sarah," he wrote, "and your successful defense against the HOA have created a powerful precedent. You've shown that individual action, backed by scientific understanding and legal recourse, can make a tangible difference. This isn't just about your lawn anymore. It's about inspiring a broader movement." The implications of his words settled deep within me. My little patch of clover, once a source of contention and ridicule, had become a beacon. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of conviction, and to the undeniable beauty of the wild, even in the most unexpected of places. The HOA might still cling to their outdated notions of aesthetics, but the ground beneath them was shifting. And I, with my officially recognized, federally protected pollinator habitat, was standing firm on that changing earth, a quiet warrior in a garden of rebellion. The fight had been worth it. Every bee sting, every violation notice, every sleepless night. My clover lawn was more than just a lawn. It was a sanctuary, a statement, and a promise of a greener, more vibrant future. The air in my living room, usually thick with the scent of brewing coffee and the faint, sweet perfume of my indoor herbs, now felt charged with a different kind of energy. It was the quiet hum of victory, the reverberation of a battle won. The HOA, that monolithic entity of suburban conformity, had blinked. Mrs. Henderson, her face a mask of tightly controlled disdain, had finally, grudgingly, conceded. The official pronouncement, delivered with all the enthusiasm of a root canal, had been that my clover lawn, with its federally recognized pollinator habitat status, was, for the time being, permissible. Permissible. It wasn't a word that resonated with the triumphant roar I'd envisioned, but it was a starting point. It was a crack in the edifice of sterile uniformity that choked our neighborhood. I could still feel the prickle of their disapproval, the silent, stinging judgment from behind perfectly manicured hedges and blindingly green monoculture lawns. They had tried to erase the vibrant life I'd so carefully cultivated, to replace a riot of cheerful blooms and buzzing bodies with their idea of pristine order. But they hadn't counted on a determined mother armed with a field guide and a growing understanding of ecological significance. The meeting had been a blur of controlled fury and calculated calm on my part. I'd walked in clutching the embossed certificate like a shield, the official seal of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a stark contrast to the flimsy, impersonal notices of violation I'd received. I'd laid out my case, not with anger, but with a quiet, steely resolve. I'd presented the photographs, meticulously documenting the species of bees, butterflies, and beneficial insects that frequented my yard. I'd quoted Dr. Thorne, his scientific validation a powerful weapon against their purely aesthetic dictates. "This isn't just grass," I'd stated, my voice steady as I gestured towards the framed certificate on the table. "This is a sanctuary. It's a vital piece of a larger, interconnected system that's facing an alarming decline. My lawn isn't a blight, it's a lifeline." There had been murmurs, a shifting of weight in uncomfortable chairs. Mrs. Henderson had sputtered, her carefully constructed composure beginning to fray. "But it's unsightly. It's not what we agreed to when we bought into this community." "Unsightly?" I'd countered, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. "Or simply different? Different from the uniform, emerald carpet that's so easy to ignore, so devoid of life?" "This isn't about breaking rules, Mrs. Henderson. It's about understanding that some rules need to evolve to protect something far more valuable than a perfectly manicured aesthetic." The turning point, I suspected, was when I'd mentioned the potential for legal action, the possibility of the EPA getting involved if their violations of federal habitat designations were pursued. The mention of governmental agencies, of compliance officers, and the potential for significant fines had a way of shifting perspectives, even among the most staunch traditionalists. Suddenly, my cheerful clover patch wasn't just an eyesore. It was a bureaucratic entanglement they desperately wanted to avoid. The retreat had been swift, though cloaked in officialese. A vote was called, a hasty consensus reached, and the motion to enforce the grass height bylaw on my property was, by a narrow margin, deemed moot. I'd walked out into the brilliant afternoon sun, the certificate warm in my hand, and felt a wave of something akin to disbelief wash over me. I had done it. I had taken on the HOA, armed with nothing but my conviction and a patch of flowering clover, and I had won. The immediate aftermath was a strange mix of celebration and continued vigilance. Lily and Daisy, my daughters, had been ecstatic. They'd declared a clover celebration day, complete with a picnic on the very lawn the HOA had deemed an offense. They'd chased butterflies, their laughter echoing through the usually hushed suburban air, and pointed out different kinds of bees to each other, their curiosity ignited by the vibrant life that now thrived just outside our door. My husband, Mark, though initially skeptical of my unconventional approach, had offered a quiet, proud smile. "You really did it, Sarah," he'd said, his voice laced with genuine admiration. "I didn't think you could." The neighbors, however, remained an interesting study. Some